All right, so we are reviewing factoring by GCF and by grouping today. So when you first looked at this problem, I'm guessing you saw that it was 4 terms, and so you thought this must be a factoring by grouping problem. So if you did that, I'm just going to recopy the problem over here, and I would say, all right, is my polynomial in standard form? Let's see, k to the fourth, k to the third, k to the second, and then k. Yes, it is in standard form already. So if I'm going to jump into factoring by grouping, like we learned last week, then I'm going to take my first 2 terms, and I'm just going to see what the GCF would be of just those 2, right? To me, it looks like my GCF would be 3k to the third. And then remember, I open up my parentheses and I say, okay, 3k to the third times what? Gives me 6k to the fourth. That would be 2k. And I say 3k to the third times what would give me negative 3k to the third. And that must be times negative 1. So my parentheses say 2k minus 1 on the inside. Then I need to take my second 2 terms, and I'd say, all right, what's the GCF of just those 2? 4k squared and negative 2k. So that looks like my GCF would be a positive 2k. Remember, I don't want to factor out the negative here because my leading term of those last 2 is positive. So I only factor out a negative if that leading term is negative, and it's not. So I say, all right, 2k is my GCF. 2k times what gives me 4k squared? Well, that would be times 2k. And then 2k times what gives me negative 2k, and that would be negative 1. So again, my parentheses here are 2k minus 1. And remember, for factoring by grouping to work, those parentheses have to match exactly, and this they do. So that those parentheses become my GCF. So that GCF comes out to the front, and it says 2k minus 1, and then in parentheses, 2k minus 1 times 3k to the third plus 2k. Now, most likely you stopped right there and you said you were finished. But I want you to look very carefully at that second set of parentheses. Check this out. Do you notice anything strange about that? Those parentheses have a GCF, don't they? Those 2 terms have something in common. Those 2 terms have a k in common. Now, a lot of times when we see that happen before, we said, oh no, that means we didn't find the full GCF, but we did everything properly and my parentheses matched. So in this case, what I need to do is I need to take it one more step afterwards. So I say, all right, those 2 terms have a k in common. So k is going to come out to the very beginning. And now I'm just looking at just this parentheses right here, right? So k times what gave me 3k to the third? It was 3k squared. And k times what gave me 2k? And that'd be positive 2. Now if I look at those 2 terms in the parentheses, 3k squared and positive 2, there's no more GCF. So now I've gotten it all. But we can't forget about my other set of parentheses, the 2k minus 1, and so I need to bring that down. And now when I look in my parentheses, there's no GCFs inside there, so this would be my final answer. So you gotta just be careful now. We're putting all the pieces together today, so you gotta really be looking out for that GCF in your parentheses if it's hiding in there. And if it is, pull it out to the very, very front, and then see what would be, like what would you have to multiply to get there, in that set of parentheses. The other set of parentheses will not change. It stays exactly how it is, just comes down to the party. Now, if you are really on top of your game, you may have noticed from the very beginning, those 4 terms did have a GCF from the very beginning, right? If I look at all 4 of these terms, they have a k in common. Now, normally I say pulling out a GCF at the very beginning is the easiest way to go. When we are factoring by grouping, it gets just a little bit complicated because we have so many parentheses. But it will work if you pull that GCF out at the very beginning as well. So if I pull that GCF out at the beginning, this becomes 6k to the third. I have negative 3k squared, positive 4k, and I have -2. And I made my parentheses a little bit too big. Right? Now I made brackets here because I know that in my next step I'm going to start using parentheses to do factoring by grouping, right? So I'm going to bring that k down out front. I'm going to keep my brackets and I'm just going to kind of ignore them. I'm going to pretend that doesn't exist. And I'm just going to work on my factoring by grouping like I normally do. So I'm going to take my first two terms here. Notice those were still in standard form, right? So we're still good to go. My GCF of these two now becomes 3k squared. Notice last time it was 3k to the third. Now it's only 3k squared. And that would be, let's see, multiplied by 2k minus 1, just like last time. And then my second set of parentheses, here we go, 4k minus 2. So now, again, my GCF on this is +2. Again, not -2, because I want it to match exactly. And my leading term here was positive, right? So, okay, so I've got 2 times what gives me 4k? 2 times 2k. 2 times what gives me -2? That would be -1. And now notice again, my parentheses do match exactly. So I have my GCF from the very beginning, this k is out front. And then the next thing I'm going to write down is that common parentheses, which was 2k minus 1. And then in those parentheses, all right, what did I multiply by? 3k squared and +2. Notice I ended up with the same exact answer as I did on the other one. They are exactly the same. If you look at the two things, you know, we didn't save a lot of work either way. So same amount of work. Whether you look for your GCF at the beginning or at the end, the thing is, you just got to remember to look for it, right? So make sure that either you look for a GCF at the beginning and you pull it out with brackets around the whole thing in the front, or you factor it by grouping right away, but then check those parentheses and look for a GCF at the end. Are you going to see some of those on your homework today? Yep. Are you going to see a lot of them? Probably not, but there'll be a couple sprinkled in there. Otherwise, if you see, just 4 terms, use that factor by grouping. And then otherwise, if there's less than 4 terms, then you can just look for a GCF like we did the day before. All right, good luck.